Dear students, dear guests, welcome to the opening lecture of our joint seminar, Global Challenges to Development, No Poverty. This course is a partnership between the Global Awareness Education at the University of Tübingen in Germany and the State University of Maringá in Brazil. This course will address the interrelated aspects of poverty, looking at different approaches and strategies to address poverty in different contexts. It includes an overview of definitions, the scope of different forms and dimensions of poverty, social protection systems and policies, links between poverty, gender, and access to resources, analysis of policy frameworks at different levels, and actual and potential strategies to support accelerated investment in poverty eradication. In both universities, the course is offered to students of different disciplines. In Tübingen as part of the Global Awareness Education and the Transdisciplinary Course Program, and at the State University of Maringá as a free extension course. The course organizers are Professor Mauricio Reinhardt and Professor Sarah Pichett, together with Luisa Rupp-Milan from the State University of Maringá, Professor Claudia Sato from Federal University of Roraima, and me, Dr. Glaucia Perez da Silva from the University of Tübingen. Now I'd like to ask my colleague Sarah Pichett to introduce our guest.
So, good morning, good afternoon. Professor Alberto Cimadamore is a researcher at the Interdisciplinary Institute of Political Economic of the University of Buenos Aires in the National Council for Scientific and Technical Research. He's currently a member of the Phoenix Plan and director of the journal Voices in the Phoenix. He was, between 2011 and 2019, director of the Poverty Studies Program of the International Science Councils, based on the University of Bergen, Norway, and full professor of International Relations Theory at the Faculty of Social Science and other nation and foreign universities. Previously, in 1996 to 2011, he was coordinator of the International Relations Area of the Latin American Council of Social Science, CLACSO, advisor to the Institute for the Integration of Latin America and Caribbean on issues of regional integration and development, and institutional advisor to CLACSO. His research focuses on sustainable development, the science of sustainability, and international economics, with an emphasis on poverty, inequality, and education for sustainable development. Thank you so much, Professor Alberto, and welcome to the course.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. I'd like to extend my thanks to Glaucia Perez and Mauricio Reinhardt for this kind invitation. I'm extremely happy to be here with you to discuss those global challenges to poverty, to development, focus on poverty, and to make this presentation. I must say that I am glad also to get back to virtual rooms that I try to avoid at this point of my career, because being a professor at the University of Buenos Aires means to deal with thousands of students. At some point, is one of the largest university in our part of the world. And now I am a bit retired of teaching, but this is going to be a very exciting experience to me. So, well, let's do what I'm supposed to do, which is discuss poverty in the context of the SDGs and focus on what I would say is going to be, at least to me, the most important part of this presentation, to discuss sustainable solutions to one of the most important issues we are dealing throughout the history of humankind, which is poverty. And what's important, we're going to do that in a way that we can put poverty in the context of the very ambitious program of the United Nations signed by 193 countries, which is the most ambitious initiative on development ever established, the SDGs, and more precisely, the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. So in the presentation, Sarah kindly mentioned that I used to be a professor of theory of international relations, which is one of the most abstract courses at the University of Buenos Aires in political science, because we deal with causes and ways to get out of war, causes of war and conditions for peace. And to be a professor of theory meant at this point to deal with abstractions. And sometimes we are not aware about how important are abstractions to understand reality. And I will make a point on this, I will take issue on this, because you will see, if I do my job properly, that those abstractions are essential to understand problems and to find out solutions. Let's see if I can do that, and I will try to do that by approaching to the issues we are going to discuss from a political economy perspective. I found in my professional career that this is a very rich approach that needs first to be understood as a perspective to approach to those weak problems. And more importantly, it's an approach that can help us, if used properly, to visualize, and I stress the word visualize, to see where we can find solutions and how those solutions can be addressed by the approach we are using. And of course, as I said before, we will frame this discussion within the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development that has in its name the word transforming our world. And this is a very important word, because I will stress that again, because this is what we need to point out in this presentation, the idea of transformation. Why? Because what we are doing up to now is not working. So it is indispensable to transform what we are doing, to transform our reality, to reach the objectives that are established by the Agenda 2030 and we all share. Because the Agenda 2030 is a very complex set of 17 goals and hundreds of indicators, not to talk about 169 targets. This is indeed very complex, and it's integrated by definition, and it's indivisible. We are aware of that, but in this case, we will try to focus on SDG 1, 2, and 4.7 is a very specific target of the goal on education that I would like to stress as well. And I said before that this will be considered as an integral part of the more complex discussion on the Agenda 2030 that I think you discussed previously. And I was asked also, and I hope I can do it, to present alternatives way of thinking and acting. This is, I'll say, an extreme challenge for a professor of theory of international relations, but I take the glove and let's see if I can do it with your help. So I will try to do that when discussing what I think is a very important part, I would say an essential part of the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, which is the localization of the SDGs, to make contact with the territory, to get that huge and ambitious program and see how we can make the proper arrangement to contact that agenda with the reality of the populations living in different territories. This is huge, but needs to be done. So we cannot avoid to talking about that. And I will use the knowledge I constructed with colleagues in the past, because I do believe that the knowledge enterprise is a collective enterprise. So I always enjoy, and I still do, creating knowledge with other people, co-working in the process of the production of knowledge, which is in the language of sustainability science called the co-production of knowledge, which is, I would say, the most effective way that I found to deal with these wicked problems. Those wicked problems, by definition, are very complex problems with difficult way of solving them. I will refer to one of the crop briefs that you can find in the crop webpage. You can download it for free, produced by Paul Speaker, a colleague, emeritus professor in a UK university, who wrote a paper on poverty as a wicked problems, where you can see the magnitude of the issues we are talking about. So this is the plan. Let's see if we can get there. So, as I said before, understanding the social dynamic of development is the enterprise we are going to share here. And I will try to do that, but identifying the structural forces that works in the system that I believe, I think, and I guess I proved, are behind the production and reproduction of poverty all over the world. I think this is important. I also think, of course, I am mainstream scientist, or I believe I am, that measurements and data and the relationship between those specific activities are an important role in science and education. But what I'm going to do now is to link some of the basic data we have available with the theory and the understanding of the system that is producing poverty and also has the ability to produce development, and in this case, sustainable development. In any case, I do think that the identification of those forces are a fundamental part of our co-production of knowledge here. And I will do that by referring to some of my previous work on poverty production or the production of inequality. Some of those work were done in Latin America, others later on, while I was working at a global level. But in any case, I always was preoccupied by the identification of the roots of the problem, of the roots of this wicked problem. And here, science is essential to understand that. So I will present some of the findings I found during the past 3 decades or so. And I will I will do that by simplifying the tons of knowledge produced not only by me, of course, it was produced by many colleagues, and I will try to apply in a very simple theoretical framework a two-level presentations that I will do about the international system and the national systems, and I will try to explain what I call the structural conflict between market and state forces, because this is the essence of the political economy as I understand it. This structural conflict arise from the interaction of those structures that I will explain later on, and I will do it, as I said, in a very simple way, because I understand here that we have students from different levels at university, grads, undergrads, and MA and PhD students. And my main argument is that we are dealing here with wicked problems that are socially constructed. And in that context, I will argue that a historical form of the state, that is the real state we are observing, can be seen as a part of problem, but also part of the solution to poverty and development. And this is crucial to see what's the way out of poverty is, and how development can be constructed in a sustainable way compatible with the 23rd agenda. So even though my two-level models are not addressing specifically to local states, I will consider that because, as I said before, the localization of the SDGs is fundamental to the process of achieving the SDGs. So the argument I am trying to develop has a very simple background, and it is that the states and market are arguably the most relevant structures we have in social sciences. I cannot think of more relevant structures to understand reality by the use of abstract concepts. And because they are abstract, they are invisible. And here we have a challenge to all of us as intellectuals or scientists or academicians, because we need a very precise definition of those invisible things that we use to explain very complex problems that we call wicked problems. And we need to find also solutions to those problems, because otherwise it will be just a mere intellectual enterprise. So definition of those invisible structures are essential. But if you, Glaucia or Mauricio or Sara, make a poll with your students and you ask them to define the states and the markets, or even if you do, if we can do that among us, we will find out that we all define a state and market in different ways. So, Houston, we have a problem, because we are talking, we can agree that those relevant structures, which we said or argue that are the most relevant in social science, can be defined in different ways. But we are in presence of the Babel Tower here, where all we are talking about the same thing in very different ways that we cannot understand each other. So this is fundamental, and I cannot get tired of stressing this. because if we do not agree on what states and market are, we cannot even discuss what the interactions of those structures produce and the way they create socially constructed problems, and even less, we cannot find the solutions to the problem we have discussed. So we need to reach an agreement on this, and don't panic. I'm addressing to the students yet, because I will try to simplify that in my table, double entry table. I will present it later on. So I just try to warn you, like in the cigarette packages, there are always warning. This is a very strong warning that you need to be aware of for the time being. I will also like to stress that we also will face another relevant intellectual challenge, which is that structural forces are substantially different at both national and international levels. This is important. This is something that sometimes we forget, but I will go deeper on this because it has deep consequences in the way we can think of the state and markets as structures, and in the way, of course, by which structural conflict develops both at national and international level. Again, this will become more clear when I present the table with the two-level analysis. But I will synthesize and simplify the IPE conflict, the international political economic conflict, and of course I will do that having in mind, I will not present here, but I will have in mind the problem known as the structure agent debate. For the students that are not familiar with this debate, I would say this is one of the most important debates in social science theory, and has to do with the effect of the structures on the agents and the ability of the agents to transform structures. And in social theory, there is a very strong conflict about how to use structures to analyze society, and the role of those structures or system on the agents, and the ability of the agents to transform those structures. Some authors think the agents are more prone to be conditioned than others, and you will find a diversity of argument in here. I will not get into that, but I need to say that this is relevant because the structures and agents are the main component of any system. And this is a very basic definition of a system. A system has two main components, as I said before, and I'm stressing it again. One is the structure, which is the systemic component by excellence, and the agent, which is not an idea, not an invisible concept, but it's a real thing. We are agents to the extent that we exert power and the ability to influence others, and of course to influence this idea called the structure. So it's a very interactive situation, which is, and I know this, is very difficult to grasp to those who are not familiar with this kind of theoretical discussions. So the two-level model is understood here as a simplification of a theory. You know that models can be either simplification of theory or simplification of reality, but the model here is a simplification of theory designed to present in a quite easygoing way the argument that I am developing so far. But again, the organizing principle is important because they are what the structures represents for the system. And the key point here are again that they are different at the international and national level. And again, this is important because the SDGs and the Agenda 2030 is a global or international, which is not the same, but we will assimilate in this case, initiative that is implemented nationally. And many of our analysis mix those levels, and I think that we need to start rethinking the way we present and we analyze the topics of the agenda at both international and national levels. But starting with the definitions, I will try to avoid more, I'd say, complex or ideological ways of defining the state, which is a rare beast for many of us. And I'll try to do that by using what I learned when I was a law student many years ago, and it's very useful for all of us. I will define the state by the tangible or constitutive elements of the state. You can use Weber or Marx's definition of the state if you wish, but the beauty of this is that you can see the state through these four components that make it easier for all of us to understand what the state is, and it will help us to avoid dangerous mistakes that are usually committed when using the word or the concept of state. So the four tangible elements of the state are, first, the constitutional order. You go and look at the constitution of any of the states you like to study. This is we are using here the state as a historical structure. So the constitution tells you what the government is, what is the hierarchy of laws, what are the role of the local states or the provincial states. You have almost everything there in a very synthetic way. You can also have the definition of citizenship, the roles of citizen, the relationship between citizens and power, almost everything. And you find there the other component of the state, the other physical component of the state, which is the government. But here, you will see that the things get a bit more complex because government, by definitions, are agents that can affect the structures. And nevertheless, in order to simplify that, we will have this as a tangible element of our constitutional, a tangible element of our structure. Again, government are visible everywhere. The structures are invisible. And that's why the structure here is the combination of these four tangible elements and the construction of an idea of what the state is. The idea is invisible, it's up there. We create that idea of a state, but those tangible elements, constitutional order, government, territory, and population, are absolutely tangible. You can touch them. And this is why we need to clarify both things, the structures and tangible elements like government. And you will see everywhere journalists, professors, students, common people that use interchangeably the notions of government and states. And this is a huge mistake, because they're very different. Governments are tangible, the structures are invisible, they do not exist. They only exist in our mind as concept. And again, I don't get tired of explaining these differences, because are fundamental to understand the problem of poverty or the development, and to find solutions to them. When we talk about the structural change, we are talking about a very relevant systemic change within the system. And I will stress this. I am discussing now changes within the system, not changes of the system. A change of the system is a revolutionary change, because you change everything. You move from one system to another system. I'm talking about changes within the system, where you modify the structure and the relationship between structures and agents in order to produce a result, which is eradicating poverty, reducing poverty, creating development, but within the system. So again, the distinctions I tried to make before are relevant to identify the sources of change. If we are a social scientist interested in helping others to change a system that is not working within the system, you need to identify the sources of change. Otherwise, how can you change the system? And this is a very important role of science and education, no? If we can picture this structural conflict again, we can start working on the sources of change that emerge from the interaction between the states and markets. And I highlighted the words of territoriality, loyalty, exclusivity, and monopoly of the legitimate use of force that are characteristic of the states. And you can see that the market has completely different organizing principles that collide with the states. So, how are we doing so far? I know that I was playing with different concepts at different levels. That's many of you. I didn't ask for your background, my mistake. But if you are not aware or familiarized with those concepts, it could be difficult. But this is the way I found it in my teaching and in my researching, to put in a more schematic way those difficult interaction I mentioned before. So, any questions so far, or we can continue and try to make it a bit clearer using this table. But you will see here two levels. Level one, national system. We have been arguing so far that national systems are essentially different of international system because of the organizing principle of the structures. And this has implication in initiatives like the one we are discussing here, the Agenda 2030, and the SDGs when discussed at both national and international levels. So you will have here the presentation of the economic structures on the right and the political structure on the left. And you will have highlighted, in the case of the state, a definition that I found quite simple and useful when thinking about the state, and it's very useful when to think about poverty, eradication, and development. So a state is, at the end, a governance structure, a structure that is behind the regulatory and policy-making capabilities that government use to reduce poverty or eradicate poverty or prevent poverty. And it is territorially exclusive within the system that I present at level 2, the international system. On the other hand, the domestic market is a non-territorially exclusive structure. And when we study economy, and international economy, we studied economy without any mention to territory, while it makes a difference when we include the notion of territories and state, and this is fundamental in our present system. You have different agents when you study each structure that interacts, and this is only for analytical process, because in reality everything is mixed, but we need to produce this distinction. Otherwise, at least to me, it's very difficult to understand the interaction, and it's difficult to me to understand where to see the problem is born and where to find the solution. So I separate those structures which are very much interlinked in the real life in order, again, to see where we can act. I present here the ordering principle that we know now, that in this argument makes a difference, and in the national system, this is very important, we are in presence of a hierarchical structure based on a constitutional order that we discussed before, and the monopoly of the use of force. On the other hand, you have a complete different ordering principle in the market, and this produces the tensions we can see in the newspapers every day. When you see the opinion in capitalist society of the entrepreneurs or the capitalist and the government, you will see the tension, and the tension has to do with this, basically. And again, this is a simplification that brings us to the second level to see the differences. In the international level, we have a different kind of society or community, I'd say, to be more precise, because we're in presence of community of state. You distinguish society from communities based on the level of organizations, and the community has a less degree of organization than the society or societies. And here we found that in the international level, there are no formal hierarchical structure. You can say that there are hegemonic states, yeah, but this is a political concept. It's not a legal concept. And formally, at the international level, all the states have the same vote, even though that you find in the United Nations that exists some kind of hierarchy in the Constitution of the United Nations itself, in the sense that the Security Council is formed by the most powerful states in the world, understood that definition as those states that have the ability to act decisively in topics of war. Security means, in this case, war or high politics, as many of us call that. So it is formally non-hierarchical. And this is very relevant, because if you see in the Agenda 2030, the states are formally in charge of the process of the Agenda 2030. And again, this is very important, because you have to descend to the level of the state level in order to see how the SDGs are getting to the territory, which end up at the local level. We're not considering here, because otherwise we would make a not so useful complex explanation of a three-level model. So here you have the agents that have the ability to reform that structure in both sides of the tables, and as you see, are different. And here, what is important is marked in red is the anarchy. Anarchy not understood as chaos, but the absence of a common superior. This is a very technical concept in international relations. Anarchical societies are those societies that have a kind of order, but the order is not hierarchical as the states, because they don't have a constitutional order enforced by a monopoly of the use of force. And this is very, very important, that mark the substantial difference between both levels of political structures. And on the other hand, at the international level, we have a similar kind of anarchy, but based on the economic logic, where you find loose or limited regulations that in the capitalist system tend to benefit capital. And this is very important, because in our world, the capital moves very, very fast, with no limits almost in the world, but labor cannot. And you will find here a problem. You will find here a very huge problem in order to when analyzing development, and in order to explain some of the concrete results of the interaction of both structures. And you can see here, I will present that in the next screen, how these have consequences on the state. And this is explained also why globalization produced what was produced in the systems we are talking. So let's highlight some of the implication of this. We have said before, we stress it again, that poverty is a social construction. But this social construction now can be interpreted as an emerging result of the actions and omissions of agents operating under structural conditions that allows or tolerate that. And those structural conditions, as you may see before, has to do with the structure of the state, with the constitutional order, where you can find that, for instance, that says that we are all equals under the law, or that we have all the right to have a minimum wage. But in practice, in many countries, this does not happen. And that's the result of the interaction of the legal system and the governments and the population on certain territories. So those are result of historical form of the state. And when I refer to historical form of the state, what I'm saying is that the Norwegian state, the Brazilian state, the Argentinian states are different, are historical form of the state. And that differ with the Chinese state, because we tend to use the word state as an excessive generalization, but when we, in theoretical terms, but when we put the notion of that structure on a certain territory, we see a huge diversity. Those historical form of states are different, of course, produce different results in terms of poverty and development. And we need to understand that. So even a capitalist state, the Norwegian state, is produce very different results of vis-a-vis another capitalist state like the Argentinian state, for instance. Again, this is important to make a note of this because it has implications for the topic we are discussing. So, needless to say, is that those different principles and structural conditions has different results in different states in form of social organization, and of course, condition development policies as it is marked there. So, what is important to extract from this table, this two-level model, is that at the end, the states are perhaps the only structure that has the capability, theoretically, I put there in my PPT that even though it is a capability, is the potential of the state, many do not use, as we can see when we interpret statistic. They have the capability, the ability to reduce, eliminate, or prevent poverty. Why? Because the state can regulate the undesired effects of market operation, which are prone to produce inequality and poverty, because markets are formidable structures to organize the economic forces, but may have, as we can see very well in reality, undesirable effects. And this is so obvious that many of the most important ideological discussions we have in the present do not even consider this, because they tend to make ideas more important than this very elemental analysis. So the political economy, the structural conflict between the states and markets, when discussing the poverty and development, need to be put within this framework. And it's so evident that the state can make the difference, that when you analyze, for instance, in the United States, poverty statistic, you can see something called market poverty. And market poverty in the United States it's over 30%, roughly. And when you see the effects of social policy and other states' intervention, that poverty is reduced by half. This is also the case of many other states. So it is evident that the states have the ability, even though many do not use it, as I said, to reduce poverty and even to eradicate poverty if you can find the right balance to do that. So in a world where we have more than enough resources to eradicate poverty, and we do not do that, if we see this, we can also see where the accountability can operate on, what the responsible entities of poverty production are, and why it is not eradicated. As simple as that. We can discuss this later on, but this is very important in order to visualize the way poverty is produced, and to visualize how you can solve the problem of poverty and where the sources of poverty, inequality, and other social problems are. So I think that this is the main intention of this presentation, and this is why I also can explain why globalization is prone to produce poverty, because of the differential abilities of capital and labor to move in the system I depicted before. But I will try to finish this presentation with a more, let's say, encouraging way of dealing with knowledge and education as a part of the solution. We need to put this discussion also in the context of SDGs as an integrated set of goals and targets, and we need to find also certain acceptable equilibriums in every state. And I'm going to go even further and to present a more complex situation, because we are talking about political economy, where we talk about economic and social results of the interaction of market and the state, as I did before. But now we need to introduce the environment in this, because it's one of the three dimensions of sustainable development, and this is very important. We need to find now acceptable equilibriums, not only between market and the state, but in relation to social and political issues, but also to environmental and climate issues, in order to achieve sustainable development in the near future. And here we need to highlight the role of science in order to present how those equilibriums can be reached, because they do not appear naturally in the system. They need to be constructed, and we need to use science and education again in order to present that. The exercise to visualize where to find these possible solutions or where to find the sources of the problems is precisely that, in order to help society to see that we have way outs, we have alternative of ways of looking at problems, even weak problems, and to find solutions. This is very complex, and the only way I conceive to start working out a solution is to use knowledge. But we have been producing knowledge in many different ways during centuries and millennia. And is that kind of knowledge useful? Yes, of course. I mean, I have no doubt. But there is a kind of knowledge that is very important now, and I think that can help us to deal better with the solution, and it's called sustainability science. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with this new way of approaching to knowledge, and it's very interesting because it's transdisciplinary in its essence. It's not interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. It's even more. It goes beyond the limits of normal science in the sense that ignore the frontiers that we have constructed with so much effort in our scientific work, because we like to defend the limits of our disciplines. And I work at the Faculty of Economic Science, which is different of the Faculty of Social Sciences, of the Faculty of Natural Sciences. No, this in the new type of science we need to deal with this weak problem is different, substantially different. We need to try to ignore the frontiers of those disciplines, but not to ignore the knowledge produced by those disciplines, because it's very important. It's the accumulation of that knowledge that will help us to find a solution. But we need to go beyond the limits, the frontiers of that science. We need to be that sense, transdisciplinary, in order to construct problem-solving approaches. And problem-solving approaches are not easygoing, and it's very difficult to produce the change from the normal science we are all educated in to this new type of science, particularly in social science, because it's a difference between science and technology, if you want, and science and applied sciences. But we have no choice. We have to deal with this need, and we need to move beyond. We need to be trans in the sense I explained before, and we need to focus on problems and solutions. And here is another of the ideas I would like to leave you with, and it's the idea of co-production of knowledge. This is very important. I'll say I've produced in my life many books myself with colleagues, and I was also I was in a place to produce more than, to help others to produce more than 60 books. But I always wonder when I produce a book, either myself or in collaboration with others, or help others to produce books, who read those books and who apply the knowledge of those books. And when I read a journal, I ask myself the same question: who read and how this knowledge is applied? And the co-production of knowledge has built-in beauty, which is that you can produce knowledge with the decision makers who are going to use the knowledge accumulated in science and with scientists, can synthesize in the way I just did, or other ways that are conceivable, functional to this. And when you co-produce knowledge, the knowledge accumulated is translated into policy. And the participatory methods that we need to design and apply in diverse contexts can be based on this premises, I would say, should be based if we want to produce a transformation of our reality before we crash with the wall that is right there, and the wall is represented by the result of the multiple crises: climate crisis, environmental crisis, social crisis, that poverty is and inequality are two of the main variables that articulate the social crisis we witness in our present. So co-production, again, is a crucial word that I like to discuss with you later on, if possible. And in order to do that, we need to change many things in our profession, because we are not, again, educated to co-produce knowledge. We are educated in another epistemology where co-production of knowledge between scientists and non-scientists is not part of the process, as simple as that. And we also need to think hard how we can transform our research programs, and I will simplify this for you as well. I did that. I thought a lot about how can I transform myself in order to work with problems and problem-solving approaches within sustainability science. And the most simple way to do that is to use sustainability as an independent variable, to include in our models sustainability as a part of the explanatory descriptive models, and also in a way that we can move forward and to articulate theories based in the use of sustainability as an independent variable. Independent variable, for those that do not use this concept in their work, everyday work, is what we try to explain and to act upon. So the other thing that this table, the table I presented before, is that we need to start focusing more and more on the role of the state and the ability that it has to deal with the problems we have discussed. And I would like to also to stress the local level, because as the concept indicates, the localization of the SDGs needs the local level, and perhaps we are not paying attention to the local level as much as we should. But this is very important, because the diversity of the problems posed by poverty, anti-poverty policies, and development and sustainable development needs to be seen at the local level. Again, historical forms of state operating at both national and local levels are essential component of a successful strategy to deal with the SDGs. So, because we are reaching the end of these presentations, we need again to be once more conscious that the governance structures that will help us to deal with poverty, inequality, and all the social, economic, and environmental problems we find in the Agenda 2030 are related to that, no doubt. These are concrete ways to produce structural changes within the system. It has to do with elemental things like progressive taxes, elimination of the implication of capital flights in those states that needs desperately capital for development, We need better policies. We know what the most effective policies are, because it has been studied, and we need to implement that. And the co-production of knowledge is very relevant in this case, because we work with the decision makers, the ways to deal with that specific problems, and this is very effective. And those are just examples of what we can define as consistent strategies and plan to achieve the SDGs. But what's very important, I would like to take a few minutes to address, is that one of the most forgotten targets, or SDGs, if you want, is the 4.7. Many people, even though didn't, many people do not even know the target 7 of the SDG 4, but it is extremely important. And this is something I'm currently working on, because I consider, and I can argue, but we don't have time now, that this is one of the most important targets we can find in the SDGs that will help us to transform the world. Because, to put it very simple, this is the way we can make the youth, we can make us all to understand what sustainable development is and how we can put it in our agenda. And can you read this? It's in green at the right on your screen. And I think that even though conceivable, this is one of the most important targets, UNESCO, it's a great difficult to implement that in the world. Actually, I'm working in Argentina. It is not even prioritized by the Argentinian state. It is not prioritized by the provincial states, and it's not even considered at local level. So, how we can move forward in a consistent strategy to achieve the SDGs if we don't know what sustainable development is? And now, after teaching at the university for many years, I started to make an experiment teaching in secondary schools and even primary schools and some tertiary schools where the educators are from. And if you ask what sustainable development is, they tell you that, oh, it has to do with environment, with avoiding plastic contamination, about producing vegetables, and very simple explanation that are far, far away of the complexity of what sustainable development is in the Agenda 2030. So we do need to work on the idea, the concept, and the application of the concept of sustainable development in our primary, secondary, and tertiary schools, not to mention the university, where it is important to do that. And to do that, to introduce the concept in all its dimensions, economic, social, and environmental dimensions, which are essential in the conception of sustainable development itself. This is essential, and we are doing that I have a project now, which is my baby project in northern Santa Fe, one of the poorest cities in a very rich province like Santa Fe. It's like Paraná, but in northern Santa Fe is the less developed state there. And I'm trying to use all I have learned, and I also learning from my mistakes, I'm trying to use that in a project based on the co-production of knowledge, and it is incredible what you can do, not only in the education and the introduction of the sustainable education in schools, but also at the political level with the local government. And you see this Plan Estratégico Participativo Vera 2030. This is just part of, or this is just one of the products made in a very small community of 20,000 plus population, where they were able by themselves. I didn't participate in the elaboration of this book, but this small community elaborated this plan by themselves. And if you see, they even are starting to construct a strategy to deal with the SDGs. And on the right of your screen, you will see how they link their program and project to SDGs. This is incredible. I mean, we are talking about a very small and poor population in northern Argentina. You will see the map of the Provincia of Santa Fe. They are starting with a diagnosis, they are elaborating project, they are putting program, and they are linking this to SDGs. And let me tell you that I can see very clearly, I can visualize here the social, the process of social transformation in motion. And I can also see how a different approach to science and education can help us to move from the very abstract exercise we did before with our table, where we consider structural problems and the different organizing principle of a structure, and we see the crash. We can use all that in order to discuss concrete ways of solution with policymakers, with students, with professors, secondary school professors, in a very concrete way through specific projects, for instance, on food security, where you can combine the 3 dimensions of sustainable development, again, economic, social, and environmental. We have started to discuss and implement organic production of vegetables that were not produced in Vera, and now this part of the social conversation towards sustainable development. So on this optimistic note, I would like to put an end of this presentation and let myself be available for all of you. If you have any doubts, and if I can answer any questions, I will be delighted to. So again, many thanks for your patience and for the time to share this experience and these abstractions that sometimes could be overwhelmed, but they have a purpose. And I hope I make clear at least the intention of this presentation. So again, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that question, because I will have the opportunity to clarify. I don't talk about the model at all. I totally ignore. This is knowledge I have and I try to transmit, but this is my job. When I talk to the community leaders, I mean the mayor of the city or the council, or politicians or professors or members of the business community, what I talk about is or are problems. what the problems they have. And because an underdeveloped community, by definition, has a lot of development problems, we focus on that. And we try to focus on problems that are easily grasped for them. And I try to coordinate the discussions in order to bring them closer to social, economic, and environmental problems that synthesize the complexity of sustainable development. For instance, we made some workshops trying to identify what the main areas of problems are for them. Well, poverty, labor conditions, unemployment, hunger, health problems, health problems related to nutrition, etc., etc. So they made in a workshop where I presented with other colleagues all the SDG in a very simplified way. I mean, all the jargon I use here, I totally forgot. I changed my hat. I forgot about the structure, system. Everything I said, I totally forgot, because this is part of my background. This is going to be part of your background if you go down to any community and start talking about problems. So we identify a series of development problems, and we try also to find way outs. And one of the way out is food security, as I mentioned before. Food security, understood as it is defined internationally. Of course, I don't even mention this definition. I know, because it's my role as a scientist and educator to work with them out solutions in their language and relate it into a concrete problem. So food security is the availability of nutritious food during the whole year. And one of the things that we realize in our workshops is that vegetables are imported from 250 kilometers away from the capital city. So you have an environmental problem because transportation of those vegetables that could be produced locally has significant environmental cost, pollution, degradation of the roots, etc., economic problems because there are 4 or 5 intermediaries that increase the cost exponentially. So and social problems because this, if those vegetables are produced locally, you can increase the employment of people, you can reduce poverty, you can increase quality job, etc., etc. So that combo allows you to work in the real world with them. And in order to move forward, what we did is to organize with the students, secondary students, and tertiary students also, a survey about how many of the products trade in this community are imported or produced locally. And more than 90% of those products were imported from location far away, more than 200 kilometers. None of them were organic. So we decided to move on organic products, which are extremely expensive in cities, but at the end you can do it in a there are lots of fertile land around there, and the price of tomatoes, to put it in concrete way, now when the survey was done, was the cost was 8 euros in the official exchange rate, or 4 euros in the in the black market, and they realize that they can produce tomatoes but by a fraction. I mean, cost cents, 20 cents the cost of production in a climate that is very, very I say very nice to produce tomatoes and green vegetables. So why they didn't do that in the past? I mean, all the youth realize that this is a mistake. So they started to discuss the idea of producing locally organic food. And this is a huge change that has an impact on SDG 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because you can also continue the list of how this project on organic production of vegetables and food security has an impact not only in the community on sustainable development, but also in the achievement of SDGs from a process of localization or territorialization of SDGs. And you start a conversation. Now, it is incredible how the major of the member of the council or the professor talk about sustainable development in a natural way, and they know all the dimensions. So it is a change that you can perceive. And again, to your question, is fundamental. You have to change the way you see science. You have your background, you have your knowledge, but you start co-producing knowledge. So you sit with the major and the local representative and say, well, where we can find the place where we can create an organic, how you say, field. Who are the person that can be here? What are the technicians? What kind of seed? How we related this with the seasons? What are the products that are more able in the season? And you have the technological centers that can help you for free to do that, because the state can provide that. But then you have the problem with the water. We have the problem con La Niña, or now with El Niño, with no water, too much water, and you have to regulate. Other problems arise, and you start co-producing knowledge because there are other people that know more than you about water, about seasons, about the best way to do that, about the neighbors that are able to help you, the neighbors that are prone to cause some troubles, but they know how to control them. It's a new set of problems, but different kind of problems. And this is how you start moving in a different kind of science, where you use science indirectly through your knowledge or through others' knowledge, maybe scientific or technological knowledge, or customary knowledge, or indigenous knowledge, whatever kind of knowledge you are talking about, and you start moving towards the solution in a very dialectical way. Yeah, and you know what's most difficult is to make students mobilize. And when you ask them to do a survey, you are asking them to do a technical job that sociologists and other economists do, and they do that with pleasure, with energy. It's incredible. And then you help them to tabulate the data and to use the data that is going to inform policies. So you are doing what everyone is supposed to do. We talk a lot about informed or policies or knowledge-based policy, But when you co-produce knowledge, it's different. And when they are producing knowledge through the survey, they realize how important is knowledge, and they talk about it, and they are proud of what they're doing, and they are doing kind of science in that way. So I'm very enthusiastic, as you may see, and increasingly enthusiastic, I would say, in that kind of job, that I totally forgot my past as a professor of theory of international relations or professor of law, and I do, but I do acknowledge that it was very important, the accumulated knowledge I had in order to see where to push the buttons. And with a different set of concept and language, you can reach to the point, because when you work on those communities, it's essential to be all on the same page, to avoid ideological issues, because in societies so divided as our societies in ideological terms, you need to use a new language. And what I try to do here, I only use the word neoliberal in one way in order to present a set of ideas, but I don't use those concepts because I don't want to create divides, but I want them to focus on what's important. And I use the structural conflict as a proxy of other more, I'd say, common ideological discussions. And this is a way where I can fly well over those divides in our society that we see everywhere. Sorry if I wasn't clear. I didn't talk about anarchism. I did talk about anarchy, undefined anarchy, not in a negative way, not as an absence of order, but as an absence of a common superior. This is a very technical concept used in international relations, actually in realism, as a theory of international relations, realism and neo-realism, and some structuralists and neo-structuralists, they use this word to see what is distinctive of the international system. And anarchy is here defined as the absence of a common superior. It was very common in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even now. And even there is a book, if you can Google, it's called The Logic of Anarchy. It's a classic, because anarchy has its own logic in the international system. And it's very interesting to see it, because you may say, well, but very, very powerful states like the United States, they can impose an order. But in international relations, you can question that, because we know the limits of the United States had in Vietnam, had in Afghanistan, in Syria, and in other parts of the world, and to impose itself over those populations and countries. This is a long discussion. It's a very interesting one. I'm passionate about it, but I'm not sure if we have the time to develop it. But again, it's a very technical concept I used to make a point, a very specific point. If you are not satisfied, Sarah, I can continue that, or we can exchange some of the ideas. I was trying, because I used to have at hand The Logic of Anarchy, but one of my kids took it. He's a weird one, I know, to pick that book. But again, this should be seen within the context of theory of international relations. Well, one of my slides, I identify some of the specific policies that can help to solve the problem of poverty. However, in what I said in my presentation, and I think I can synthesize how this structural conflict can help to solve some of the problems we were discussing here, like poverty or inequality, is the use of the regulatory power of the state in order to avoid some of the markets of the problems caused by the market as an efficient organizer of the economy of a society. So the unintended, if you want to, consequences of the creation of goods and services that produce markets when they orient the production and the commercialization and the distribution of goods and services could be solved by the states. And you have many tools. Some of them are in one of the slides. Others can be imagined by you or extracted from the social policy literature that has been working on that for quite a while. Working with participatory methodologies, you try to avoid complex constructions as sustainability science. What's important is to focus on problems and solutions. What sustainability science does is to provide an epistemological framework to organize the production of knowledge, which is, in that case, my mindset is organized by the principle of sustainability science. By the way, in one of the first slides, there is a book on sustainability science that can be downloaded. All the images of the books I presented can be freely downloaded from different parts of and different repositories. And what community does is just they perceive that they have a problem and they have an interest to solve the problem. In participatory methodologies, there is a role of coordination that in this case is exercised by the coordinator. In this case, it's me. We have a research project with scientists and non-scientists that are working on different topics. One of them is budget at municipal level. The other is education for sustainable development, and the other topic is social mobilization. So we have three elements in a research project where the coordinator tried to use the principle of sustainable science to co-produce knowledge in the field of education. We have an objective because we previously made a baseline where we identified that the programs of secondary school or the secondary school we were working with had no concept of sustainable development within the curricula of the course. So we departed from zero. And now what we are doing is to introduce the concept of sustainable development, the education for sustainable development developed by UNESCO, and the pedagogy of education for sustainable development, which is very specific, into the curricula of a college. So what they do is participate in the research, and the research is very practical. They had to look to every program taught at the school, and they found out that the concept of sustainable development, as defined here in this conversation, through its three dimension was not included. There were partial problems that were discussed, but not the concept that we're discussing. So now what we're trying to do is to modify those programs, modify the curricula of the school we are working with. So they participate in the whole process, diagnosis and action. This is action research, which aims to modify the curricula of the course. So they are fully engaged, and we do not use again the word sustainability science in this project. It is as the background and its responsibility of the science part or scientifics participating in this, and the other researchers participate using their knowledge. They know much better than the scientists that participate what the curricula of secondary school is, what reform, how this is going to impact, how they treat everything. So we combine different knowledges towards an objective, which is to include education for sustainable development, and the pedagogy it's developed, which is very specific in the curricula of school. And we're making progress in 2 years, tangible progress, and this is the beauty of it.